Hello once again. This is Tony Wright, First Love Christian Church, or FLCC, and A.B. Wright Ministries. This is the 90-day Bible study, and we're on day 27. We're in 2 Kings, 4th chapter, 38th verse, through the 15th chapter and the 26th verse. So, when we left off, Elijah had anointed Elisha, and he was about to be swept up in the whirlwind, right? And Elisha had literally picked up the mantle and carried right on telling people what thus saith the Lord. Now, we went on to heal the waters there at Jericho, and then he prophesied that the kings of Israel, Judah, and Edom would defeat the Moabites, and that it would happen as a result of water filling the valley between their forces and the forces of Moab. Then Elisha was approached by a woman whose husband had died, and she was afraid that the creditors were going to come and take what her and her sons had left. So Elisha told her to go get all the vessels that she could from her neighbors and anywhere she could get them, and go in the house with her sons, and to close the door and pour oil from the pot of oil that she had. And she did, until they ran out of vessels to put oil into. And when she had no more vessels, the flow of oil stopped. And then Elisha told her, go sell the oil, pay her debts, and her and her sons could live off of what money was left. Then there was this Shunammite woman whose house Elisha often passed by, and he would stop and eat. She would give him bread to eat and so forth. And since he was by so often, she and her husband actually fixed a bed for him to stay in to have when he come by. So he had his servant Gehazi to ask the woman what they could do for her since she had been so nice to them. And the woman said, well, she lives in the same village with her family, and she pretty much has everything she needs. So Elisha asked Gehazi what they could do for her. Gehazi told him that she and her husband had no children. So Elisha called her back, and she came up to the roof where she had made the bed for him to stay in. And he told her that this same time next year that she would be holding her son. Now, she didn't believe him at first, but sure enough, she did have a son. Then one day while this child was very young, still young, he was out in the field playing where his father was working. They were reaping I think barley from the field. Anyway, the child got sick. They took him back to his mother. And while she was holding him, the child died. And the woman took him up to the roof and laid him on the bed where Elisha had slept when he came by. Then she went and she got a donkey from one of her workers, and she left to go find Elisha. Her husband was saying, it's not the time, but she was determined. She left. So when she was coming into Mount Carmel where Elisha was, he saw her, and he sent Gehazi out to meet her. But she came anyway and told him that she didn't ask for a son. And she told him that she didn't want to be deceived. And now her son is gone. So Elisha told Gehazi to take his staff, go lay it on the child's face. But the woman said, I'm still not leaving. So Elisha, he left and went back with her too. Now when Gehazi, he was ahead of them, when he laid that staff on the boy, nothing happened. So he went back to meet them, and he told Elisha. And when Elisha got to the home, he found the boy dead, lying on the bed there. So he shut the door, and he prayed, and he laid his body across the boy. Then he got up and he walked back and forth there in the house praying. Then he went back and he stretched himself across the child's body again, and the boy sneezed 7 times. And then his eyes opened up. Boy. So then, next thing, there was this old boy, Naaman, captain of the host in Syria. Now, he had great favor in the eyes of his master, and he was a great man of valor. But Naaman was a leper. And Naaman and his wife had this maid that they had taken from Israel. And the maid had told the wife that if Naaman was with the prophets in Samaria, that the prophet would recover him of his leprosy. So the word got back, and the king actually wrote a letter to the king of Israel. And he sent Naaman, and the letter said that he was sending his servant Naaman there so that he could be healed of his leprosy. Boy, when the king of Israel read that, he lost it. Why were they sending this to him? He said, I can't give life or heal, and they just send him here like I'm supposed to heal leprosy? Why is this dude trying to start stuff with me? But when Elisha heard about Naaman, he sent to the king and said, just send him to me, and they will know that there is a prophet in Israel. So Naaman came, and he stood there in the doorway of Elisha. And Elisha sent a messenger out to Naaman and told Naaman to go down and wash himself in the Jordan 7 times. And Naaman went off. Boy, what? I've come all the way here, and this dude doesn't even come out to see me, doesn't call on the name of the Lord, didn't wave his hands, didn't strike his hands over me, nothing. Just talking about go wash in that nasty Jordan. He must be crazy. The rivers in Damascus are much better than any waters anywhere in Israel. And if I was going to go wash in a river, why wouldn't I have just washed in one of those? What in the world? You know, some things we just don't understand at times, right? Don't make sense to it. Then some of Naaman's servants went to him and said, sir, if he asked you to do something really difficult or extreme, wouldn't you have done that? So why not at least try something that's so simple? Okay, so Naaman went down to the Jordan and he dipped himself 7 times. And just like Elisha had told him, his leprosy was gone. His skin cleared up. Boy, Naaman went back to Elisha and told him, listen, now I know there's not a God anywhere on earth except here in Israel. And then he offered to pay Elisha or give him an offering of something, but Elisha refused to take any money. So Naaman, told him when he gets back, he was only from now on, all his offering was going to God. He'd have to be in their temple, but he was going to God. So he left. But Gehazi, Elijah's servant, said, hey, maybe my master Elisha wouldn't take what Naaman had. But somebody needs to, might as well be me. So he followed Naaman. And when Naaman saw him, he went to him and he asked, is everything all right? And Gehazi told him that Elijah said that he had a couple of prophets coming in later and he could, use a little change and a couple of outfits, And Naaman said, sure, here, take twice as much as he asked for. So Gehazi went back and he dropped that stuff off at his house. And then he went in and he was in there where Elisha was. So the first thing Elisha asked him was, where you been? So Gehazi, he tried to lie. Who, me? Nowhere. Yeah, right. So Elisha told him, don't you know that my spirit was with you when he returned to meet you? You shouldn't have taken money or anything else. So now the leprosy that he had, you will have. And all of your family after you. Oh my goodness. Boy, even when we know better, people think they're hiding things from God the same way. It won't work. Anyway, the Syrians, they were constantly at war with Israel. But every time that they were setting up camp against Israel, Elisha would warn the king, and the king would send word out to the troops in the area. So the king of Syria, he called his servants in and asked them, who among you is giving information to the enemy? And they told him, it's not us. It's Elisha that's warning the king of Israel. So the king of Syria, he found out where Elisha was, and he was going to send his captain and some troops out to bring him in. So the night that they arrived where he was, they surrounded the city. And the next morning, when Elisha's servant went out, he saw all the chariots and horses and horsemen surrounding the city, and he panicked. And he asked Elijah, with all those men and chariots and horses surrounded, what we're going to do? But Elisha told him that there are more with us than there are with them. So he prayed that, so that the servant's eyes could see what he saw. And when the servant looked, he saw that the whole mountain was full of chariots of fire all around him. Boy, if God be for us, don't get me started. So when the soldiers came in, Elisha prayed that they would be blinded, not able to, tell what was going on. And he told them that they were in the wrong place. So to follow him, and he would show them where they needed to go. And he led them to Samaria. Now, when Elisha got there, he prayed that their eyes be open, so that they could see where they were. And they saw that they were in the heart of Samaria. Now, the king of Israel, he thought that he'd been given a gift. You hear me? These people have been terrorizing you. And now here they are right in your midst, surrounded. But Elisha told them that not to harm them, that they were to feed them and let them go. And that's what they did. So the attacks and the attack team, they didn't come in and bother Israel anymore. But Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, he cut off the city of Samaria. And it came to a point where there was no food. They were actually literally eating their children. And Elisha prophesied, though, that meal and flour was going to be so plentiful that it would almost be given away. And then one of the guards for the king heard him say, he said, yeah, right. Maybe if God were to open windows in heaven, that might happen. And Elisha told him that he would surely see it, but he wouldn't be able to eat any of it. Now, there were 4 lepers that said if they stayed there in the city, they were surely going to die. But if they went out and they were captured by the Syrians, that maybe they would just be captured and kept alive, and they would feed them so they'd have something to eat. So they might live. But if they stayed there, they were going to die. So they left and they went out and they came upon this camp where the Syrians had been. And all the things were there, but the people were gone. They went through, boy, they were eating and grabbing stuff. But God had caused the Syrians to hear this great army of people and horses and chariots. And they were afraid that they were going to be overtaken. So they had just fled. And they went, left in such a hurry. They left everything behind. So when these lepers got back to Samaria, they told what they had found. And the king at first didn't believe that. He thought that the Syrians were setting a trap for them. But they convinced him that they should at least send a small team out to check it out. And they did. And the team found things just like the lepers had told them that they were. So then the king sent a guard, the same guard that made that comment about the window of heaven, down to guard the gate to the city. But there was a great mass of people went out, and they went over to the camp, boy, and they just got everything, right? And they were coming back. So it's just like Elijah had said, that flour and meal and stuff was in such abundance that it was cheap. And when this huge mass of people were coming back through the gates, they trampled this guard. So it turned out he did see it, but he didn't get to eat any of this stuff, right? So God had told Elijah that Jehu, the captain of the host for Joram, the king of Israel, was to be anointed king. So Elisha sent a messenger to pour oil over Jehu's head and to prophesy to him. So Jehu went, and he went to find Joram. And at the time, Ahaziah, the king of Judah, had gone to meet Joram. Okay, so Jehu killed Joram in battle, and he killed Ahaziah as well. Boy, and then he went on a cleaning spree. This dude was wiping out everything that had a connection to Ahab or Baal. Do you hear me? He had the 70 sons of Ahab killed that lived in Samaria, and had their heads brought to Jezreel and placed at the gate. He killed 42 relatives of Ahaziah. Boy, this will clean up some stuff, won't it? Then Jehu called a worship service for Baal in Samaria. And all the Baal followers were to be there. And he asked them to make sure that they didn't see anyone among them that didn't worship Baal. And then once he knew that only ones there were believers in Baal, he had them all put to death. But for all that he did in trying to get rid of, this nation of Baal worshippers and evil practices, to rid the nation of Baal worshippers and evil practices, he failed, though, to continue to walk in the ways of the Lord with all his heart. But for his commitment, though, God promised that his seed would sit on the throne for 4 generations. So the seed of Jehu followed him for 4 generations after him. Now, when Ahaziah died, his wife sought to kill all of his sons so that she would reign. Boy, what in the world? But Ahaziah's sister hid the baby boy, Joash. And when Joash was 7 years old, he was revealed. So the queen had to give up the throne. Well, after they, killed her. But anyway, Joash became king. And he did mostly what was right in the sight of the Lord. But he still failed to rid Judah of this idolatry stuff. But then he was killed by some of his own servants in an uprising. And to keep things just crazy, as if some of this wasn't already crazy enough, you notice that there was a King Joash in Israel too, right? And there were 2 kings named Jeroboam in Israel. And King Azariah in Judah was also called King Uzziah. You remember hearing about Isaiah seeing the Lord sitting on the throne, high and lifted up, in the year that King Uzziah died, right? That's Azariah? Well, if not, we'll get to it. But right now, we're just going to get out of here. Until next time, my brothers and sisters, the word is still good though. So keep reading it and keep checking us out on social media when you can. And you'll find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and tell your friends, tell your neighbors, FLCC, we're on the move. Brothers and sisters, we're taking ministry back to the first love. See you again soon though. Peace.